timely session, really important. And it's really great to have speakers from both Changeworks and Warmworks with us today. So a couple of housekeeping announcements. When you joined, you would have been put onto mute. So that should be where you are now. And we'll hand over to our speakers shortly, and then we'll be opening up for Q&A. The session should be lasting for around 1 hour, and we are going to be recording. We are recording now. And so a copy of this can be sent following the session. And we'll also make sure that presentation slide decks are shared as well. So as we go on, please use the chat function at the bottom of the screen to ask any questions, and we'll make sure those are answered as we go along. And if you're comfortable to have your video turned on, that would be great so we can see each other, but not a problem if you'd rather have it turned off. So that is everything from me. And again, thank you for joining us. And I'm now going to pass over to Agnes to kick us off.
Thanks, Ellie. I will just get my slides up and shared. Does that look okay for everyone?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, so good afternoon. My name is Agnes, and I am a researcher in the consultancy team at Changeworks. And I was part of the team that delivered the research that I'll be talking about today, alongside with my colleague Freya Burns, who is also here. I'm going to give you a brief overview of this research that we published a year ago in April 2023. It was commissioned by a consortium of organisations across rural Scotland, primarily driven by housing associations and Highlands and Islands Enterprise. The overall aim of the research was to provide an evidence base which highlights the extent and impact of fuel poverty in rural Scotland, and to provide solutions and show what can be done to tackle it. We took a multi-pronged approach to the evidence gathering, as you can see on the slide. And our output was 2 documents: A Perfect Storm, which explores the extent, drivers, and impacts of rural fuel poverty, and The Solutions, which is fairly self-explanatory. It explores the solutions that we identified and tested through a series of online workshops. It was a piece of highly collaborative research, which involved over 50 organisations across Scotland. I'm sure there are people here today who were involved. And this collaborative approach brought together diverse experiences and perspectives and led to really productive discussions in the workshops. So beyond quantifying rural fuel poverty, A Perfect Storm explores in detail the complex web of factors that play into it. The 4 widely recognized drivers of fuel poverty, represented by the 4 circles in this diagram. And beyond this, we identified a subset of rural-specific drivers, which were further compounding fuel poverty in rural areas. And so a lot of these challenges overlap with challenges to rural retrofit. For example, we see a prevalence of property archetypes that are more difficult to retrofit, such as older detached houses with solid stone walls, that lower income levels and a higher cost of living, which results in householders being less likely to be able to afford their energy bills, as well as energy efficiency improvements. And we found that the drivers and impacts are really complex and interrelated. For example, you might have a lack of employment and training opportunities, which can lead to lower incomes, but also result in fewer skilled people available to carry out retrofit. And in turn, you might have a higher cost of retrofit, resulting in fewer houses benefiting from improved energy efficiency. So these are some of the things that our solutions are looking to address. A key point of the research was to be really solutions focused. We identified 29 solutions across 9 themes that you can see here. And there is a significant overlap between solutions that address rural fuel poverty and those that address the barriers related to rural retrofit, especially when we look at local implementation. I'm trying to keep this short, so I'll just briefly discuss some of the solutions across two of the themes that we identified. And in the next presentations, our colleagues will touch on how this aligns with their experiences on the ground. So delivering retrofit requires the development of local supply chains, and that's something that also addresses some of the drivers of fuel poverty. The stakeholders that we spoke to identified a number of barriers in this area. For example, the fact that there are significant skill shortages and opportunities to train and gain skills often don't exist in rural communities. Micro businesses face difficulties accessing work in the public sector due to procurement processes or the administrative or financial burden of accreditations, such as PAS 2035. And they often face higher costs of materials due to not being able to use economies of scale. Some of the actions that stakeholders identified included apprenticeships. They're seen as really crucial in overcoming supply chain barriers, but they're also difficult for small businesses to provide. So there's a need for more funding in this area specifically. Small businesses require a clear pipeline of work and certainty around what type of work, what types of accreditation and training will be required, as well as financial support to access training and support with travel and accommodation costs. And collective purchasing could be used to reduce the unit cost of heat pumps or building materials, something that could be either self-organized by businesses or centrally organized with some role for local authorities or regional development agencies. Another really central theme throughout our findings was the need to improve support on the ground for householders. Advice services are key for both emergency support and for long-term fuel poverty alleviation, which is also including providing retrofit support and advice. And the stakeholders who took part in our research recognize that advice really has to be available through multiple channels in order to meet different customers' needs. And they felt that local face-to-face delivery is lacking in many rural areas, and it has to increase to complement what already exists through national channels. So the solutions here the solutions address multiple barriers in this theme. There is a level of distrust and reluctance sometimes to engage with non-local services, as well as low awareness of what services are even available. This is an aspect that's really important when it comes to retrofit, as we'll hear in the other presentations. And there is a complex landscape of funding. For example, there are multiple grants for fuel poor households to access retrofit, such as Eco4, Warmer Home Scotland, and ESAB's funding, but it can be really difficult to navigate. So one of the solutions that came out of the research was funding and empowering community anchor organizations. And what we mean by that is having organizations that are local, trusted, and accessible, who deliver energy support in all rural areas. And one of the aims of this solution is to coordinate existing local efforts, as well as creating a single accessible entry point for householders who are looking for energy-related advice and support. And the idea is that, as well as delivering advice, anchor organizations could play a role in coordinating area-based approaches to retrofit and enable work to be conducted at a community scale. So a key conclusion that came out of the research is that there really is demand for coordinated energy efficiency upgrades, for example, through area-based schemes. People want high quality whole house retrofit, and there is an awareness of the need to avoid piecemeal and single measure retrofit. And I think generally it's recognized as a really important part of the solution to fuel poverty. So the research was commissioned with the aim of getting rural fuel poverty on the agenda And from what we've seen in the past year, it has succeeded in that aim, and it has sparked new conversations around the issues that rural communities face and how they can be addressed. So in the months following publication, a perfect storm was cited by several news outlets as evidence of the disproportionately high levels of fuel poverty in rural areas. And this has helped raise awareness of the extent of the issue and its many consequences on both individuals and communities. We've seen impacts in the policy landscape. Scottish Labour MSP wrote a grant, lodged a motion in May last year to have the issues raised by the research debated in Parliament. And the research team was also invited to present the findings to the Scottish Fuel Poverty Advisory Panel, who cited the report as key evidence in their recommendation to introduce a social tariff to support low-income and vulnerable households. Importantly, we've also heard about a number of more direct impacts of the research. It's informal rural development. For example, Highland Adapts have used the report to inform their adaptation work in the Highlands. And ChangeWorks is coordinating a bid to the National Lottery's Climate Action Fund for a project to build robust retrofit supply chains. And that's in partnership with 6 community anchor organizations forming the Highlands Community Energy Partnership. And crucially, it's supporting action on fuel poverty. For example, the research has influenced Ecotricity to prioritize fuel per households in rural communities as a target audience of their Warm Home Discounts industry initiative. And it's also been used as evidence by the British Gas Energy Trust to prioritize work to tackle fuel poverty in rural communities. So it's been really great to see that the research has been useful to the communities that it relates to. I think that's a testament to the fact that it was a really collaborative effort and reflects the broad cross-section of organizations and individuals who were part of identifying all the different solutions. That's everything from me. The reports are available on our website, and Freya and myself are happy to answer any questions either today or you can get in touch with us by email. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that, Agnes. That's really helpful. And I suppose I would just add that from the perspective of SFHA, we've used and referenced that report in so many different ways with different groups, with Ofgem, with the likes of the Energy Consumers Network and Consumer Scotland. So I think it's been really useful to lots of us in different ways. So I think next we are handing over to Paul McGee. So we'll just wait for some slides to come up, and Paul, I hand over to you.
Thanks, Ellie. A brief apology from me for the state of my voice today. I woke up with a bit of a croak in my voice this morning, so apologies for that. But thank you very much for having me. Delighted to be here representing Warmworks. My name is Paul McGee, and I have the pleasure of leading our local delivery division. And I'm going to talk about some of our experiences in terms of delivering retrofit in rural areas within Scotland. If I could flick to the next, Karen, please. Thank you. Since 2019, I'm sure many of you be aware that Warmworks have managed the National Fuel Poverty Scheme for many years, but in 2019 decided to diversify and begin to manage projects tackling fuel poverty on a retrofit basis across various rural geographies within Scotland, including places like the Scottish borders, Dumfries and Galloway on the west side, right across the Highlands and Islands and northeast Scotland. And Lots of those projects have focused on complex combinations of measures, touching on some of the things that Agnes mentioned earlier around individual piecemeal improvements, not necessarily providing benefit. There's been a focus on combinations of measures within those deliveries into many properties for both energy efficiency and fabric improvements across those homes. Those projects have predominantly been delivered across social landlorded properties, and have included funding streams from the government's Social Housing Net Zero Fund, SP Energy Networks Green Economy Fund, and obviously the Eco Fund that's available too. The reach of some of those programs has been able to access and utilize approximately £30 million worth of funding, and it's reached some of the hardest to treat homes in some of the hardest to reach areas, and for some of those residents in Scotland who have historically been some of the hardest to engage. And some of the things that I'll talk about are how we've tried to address some of those challenges and some of those difficulties to make sure that we do create that reach, and to make sure that we bring as many people with us along the transition journey as possible. Thanks, Karen. So just a representation of some of those programs that I've mentioned. Don't worry, I'm not going to read through all of these individually, but there's a description within here of a number of different programs that have been delivered within some of those rural areas, and some of the individual measures and interventions that have been delivered include those combinations I mentioned earlier in terms of the likes of renewable heating in air source heat pumps, solar PV arrays, and battery technology to combine the generation and storage at a very local level. We've delivered a number of interventions that are focused on fabric too, extracting failed and or old cavity wall insulation and replacing with new, utilizing the new measure available, or newish measure available, of robotically applied underfloor insulation for homes where traditional underfloor insulation is difficult to deliver, and lots of different measures across lots of different property types in many rural areas, which have been able to ensure that these homes that, as I mentioned earlier, have stereotypically been harder to reach and harder to treat, are able to benefit. Thanks, Karen. So 3 key themes for us in terms of ensuring that we are able to deliver for everybody. Our first one is creating confidence within the resident cohort that we are looking to engage with. We know that the residents that we're looking to engage with care about their homes and care about their communities. And as a result, I think we all have found over recent years that there can often be a little bit of reticence to engage with organisations, particularly with respect to energy, and therefore underpinning any kind of the work that we're doing with trying to embroider confidence into the people that we're trying to support has been absolutely critical. On top of that, we try not to take the approach that the programs being delivered and the interventions being delivered are being delivered as a top-down approach to the individual or to the property. Certainly with the measures that we're trying to deliver out there, it's really important that the resident becomes part of that end-to-end delivery, part of that solution, because their engagement and their contribution towards that journey really supports the efficacy of the technologies that are being used and the measures that are being installed. And thirdly, ensuring that we learn with each iteration of these programs that we're delivering, ensuring that we understand the benefit, the impact that the programs are having, and ensuring that as we move forward with new future-facing technologies, with newer designed programs of work and into newer areas that may incorporate more residents who are hard to reach perhaps or hard to engage with, we know about what we've learned from previous projects and make sure that we can optimize the solutions that we're delivering ongoing. Thanks, Karen. Excuse me. In terms of our first pillar of creating confidence, what we found is that our communications team is an absolute cornerstone of being able to create this confidence within the community. We have to ensure that there's a link to and a presence of our people at hand for the residents in these communities to engender that confidence and to provide a face and to provide a presence for people to feel more at home within their own home environment, within their own community environment. We provide things such as an introduction to Warmworks as a partner of the housing provider through our communications team. We also provide and arrange local engagement events in community halls, in church halls, question and answer sessions on particular technologies that might be being delivered, as well as local press and social media. Again, just emphasizing that accessibility to people and to a presence from Warmworks as a manager of the interventions being delivered. We create obviously customer facing collateral, leaflets, brochures, customer folders, all those kinds of things, which again are supposed to make the people that we're trying to support feel more connected with the work that's going on, and for them to see a brand presence that's continues through perhaps those engagement events, perhaps those letters they receive, the customer folder where some of the documents are. That continuity again helps embroider their confidence in the service that they're receiving over what may be a significant period of time. And obviously, Agnes touched on this earlier on. We try to engage local supply chain partners wherever possible, and get them to act as advocates for new technology, because again, feeding that back into communities is really quite powerful. It is important to understand what Agnes mentioned earlier around the availability of a lot of these skills of local supply chain in these communities isn't always commonplace. Thanks, Karen. And just to represent some of the things that I've mentioned there, you know, creating that confidence in the community, it does require being present. It does require having a face in front of community events, providing some touch and feel appliances, taking them to the community, and having somewhere where we can talk to people, having a base where people can ask questions, and also providing material out there that allows people to read in their own time about things that can often seem quite alien to them, in terms of, you know, fancy sparkly heat pumps or batteries, or those things that aren't quite readily understandable because they are quite modern pieces of technology. Thanks, Karen. I mentioned about the second pillar of our delivery in terms of providing support. It's really obvious that that support's critical. It's critical to the residents. It's critical to housing associations, and it's critical to people that subsequently engage either directly from Warmworks or indirectly from Warmworks. And we've tried to embroider into our delivery training programs for housing and resident liaison officers, so that they can be more familiar with technologies and be more familiar with processes in order to support the residents who may feel more comfortable in going to them to ask questions in the first instance or throughout the journey. We also put training programs together for maintenance and first response teams. It's probably slightly more technical training so that there's product awareness and there's understanding of programming of appliances and programming of technology. And we also put bespoke training on and coordinate bespoke training for the supply chain that's delivering the measures from the manufacturers who are obviously supplying product. We provide some support for residents in terms of the coordination of the overall end-to-end journey by having sustained engagement with the likes of the DNOs to facilitate load upgrade works, to facilitate the unlooping of properties, all of which forms a massive proportion of properties across rural areas. Unlooping of properties and load upgrades is a significant part of the journey of transitioning across to the electrification of energy within a home. Property clearance and things like asbestos management, which can also be prominent in certain rural areas, is part of our service, as well as obviously organising things like scaffolding, meter changes, mains isolation switches. Again, things that can be quite prominent in rural areas because those works haven't necessarily been reached in previous iterations of previous schemes. We also find that one of the most important things within the journey of transitioning homes in rural areas is a signposting of tariff and energy suppliers and the support that can be gained for residents from energy suppliers, from energy retailers, ensuring that they're on the right tariff. And it was something that I saw from that initial diagram that Agnes shared earlier. Tariffs and signposting are one of the key cornerstones of making sure that any interventions on the technological side, any interventions on a lifestyle side are also coupled with tariffs and the energy plan that the home's on. Thanks, Karen. And lastly, the third pillar that we try to focus on, just in terms of review and results, I mentioned earlier, we try to create some retrospective reports and some retrospective understanding of all the programs that we deliver. And on the screen there is some snapshots around some of the savings that we've published, some of the benefits, the real actual benefits that residents have gained from the interventions that we've delivered. We've seen savings of up to 85% of people's energy bills by installing some of these programs, which is life-changing, really is transformational for people. And we understand that from the case studies that we can access from customers whose confidence that we've gained, whose support that we've tried to facilitate within the journey. They will tend to respond to us to say, yes, it's gone great. Perhaps sometimes it didn't go so great, but in capturing it, we understand and learn from each program that we've delivered. And in reviewing those results, again, it helps us to inform the future of the programs that we're going to be delivering, the future of the net zero heat funding that's going to be available, and to help us ensure that we're continuing to focus on people in the right way. Thank you, Karen. So, in summary, it's really important to Warmworks in delivering these programs, as I'm sure it is everybody within this session. It's really important that the focus is that no one gets left behind, and that rural areas can often, we can often encounter people, as I mentioned earlier, that are hard to reach, that are hard to engage with, and whose homes are hard to treat. But you get the most benefit from so doing. And if the transition is to achieve its aims and to ensure that nobody is left behind through perhaps a lack of understanding, perhaps a reluctance to engage with what as I mentioned earlier, are future-facing technologies and quite perhaps sometimes overawing technologies, then we're not going to achieve what we all want to achieve. We feel like the skills required to deliver these interventions is really broad. It covers technical understanding, but it also covers an environmental understanding, a focus on climate, the climate agenda clearly, social and professional expertise, all of which is founded on communications right at the start of any of these journeys to ensure that people trust and support the process and are willing to embrace what we're trying to help them with. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Paul. And I can hear your voice was maybe going just at the end there. So if anyone does have any questions, then you can raise your hand or put them in the chat. But if there aren't any in the meantime, we'll go to our third speaker. So we'll hand over to Amber, and Paul will give your voice a little break, and we'll perhaps come back to you for some more questions.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just share my screen. Is that sharing okay?
Yes, we can see that.
Fab. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, well, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Amber Monteith. I'm a program manager within the project delivery team here at ChangeWorks. I look after our delivery programs and teams across the north of Scotland for both private householders and social tenants. I work closely with registered social landlords to address fuel poverty and energy efficiency and ensure people feel more comfortable in their homes. So for over 11 years, ChangeWorks has been delivering projects across Scotland, and we've been expanding our reach down south and up north, especially the last few years. So before I talk about some of the amazing opportunities we've had to deliver projects and the tenants we've been able to help, it's important to note there's been obstacles for us to overcome, and apologies as some of these will be going over what Paul rightly pointed out in his presentation. So for us, delivering, we have the majority of our staff in Edinburgh, so building a strong relationship with local authorities and housing associations up north and gaining trust is paramount. The idea of having an organization from the Central Belt delivering on local energy strategies and dealing with local concerns can cause worry of misunderstanding. So with ChangeWorks and the contractors and the RSL involved, gaining trust with the social tenant is important so they can understand our role and to know that we're here to help them. ChangeWorks has typically delivered projects within a specified area or data zone. However, the majority of projects we look after in the rural north are dispersed properties in various settlements, but not necessarily towns and villages. So our internal systems have had to adapt to this approach, as well as the way we go about delivering the actual projects, as there tends to be no single site that we're at. This is also something to take into account when doing marketing, social media, or in-person events, as Paul had pointed out previously. The local supply chain, as we've heard about today, it is a challenge. As our projects tend to be larger with multiple measures, the majority of contractors that actually have the capacity and the resource to bid for them are typically located in the Central Belt. So this means that we can sometimes see less competitive tenders for work, which can lead to higher costs. As well, the contractor will tend to not be local and will have to drive longer distances. That can cause delay and mistrust with tenants as well. Weather, an obvious barrier for disrupting the timescale of works, but also ensuring that the measures are actually fit for purpose. For instance, ensuring batteries for solar PV can handle the drop in temperature. And lastly, the nature of delivering in a rural area means that there are things to consider that call for a bespoke approach for the project. So for instance, some rural areas may use one procurement organization between many of them, which could lead to delays or simply a different way to do procurement. There are conservation areas to consider, VAT surveys, all of which need to be thought of prior to delivering the project to ensure the timeline works. And lastly, depending on the funding stream, many have tight deadlines. So for the Social Housing Net Zero Heat Fund, for instance, we know that that funding can be lost if you're not delivering in time. So that could be a massive barrier. So, sorry, my screen is just frozen. Here we go. Hopefully that's on opportunities now. Okay, so to address the challenges, ensure we're able to deliver efficiently in the rural north, there are a few things that we've learned along the way that address some of those barriers that I spoke about earlier. So building trust not only with an RSL, but the tenant, as I say, is vital. We want to ensure that they're brought in during the process and understand how to use their new technology efficiently. We focus a lot of effort on householder handover packs, which outline how to use the new technology and the contact details of organizations involved, so they have that information to hand. As well, we have many resources on our website for those who use the internet, and that is, on the measures, what is it, what it does, how to use it. We have a dedicated project management team based in the north to deliver these projects. So it not only gives us local knowledge, but we're close to all of the sites and can monitor the projects more effectively. We also work closely with Affordable Warmth on many projects as a wraparound service for tenants with aftercare. We've had community events and organized visits for manufacturers to explain to householders how to use their renewable technology. And likewise, we have a heavy on-site presence with our quality assurance team that can help householders on the spot to answer any questions or concerns they might have. And it's been particularly successful when contractors haven't necessarily been very forthcoming with timelines or communication. It helps to mitigate that concern being turned into a complaint or something bigger. Building this trust can also come in the way of flexible delivery. So that means our marketing can very much be tailored to project needs, whether digital with Google Ads, social media, or through direct mailing with FAQs, again with contact details. Having logos, for instance, a really simple thing, but having that from RSLs as well as a funding body has helped build the trust. We found that there are tight-knit communities both on and offline, which means that people do share their experiences of these schemes with their neighbors, friends, family. So if they have a good experience, others will know, and that's been quite beneficial for our projects and also spreading that word. Sometimes it does seem, too good to be true in some instances, so it's also a good way to show the legitimateness of the project. Understanding that one size does not fit all, and we must keep finding ways to improve our project delivery for rural areas is important. So thinking about if multiple contractors is appropriate for a project, how that works logistically can be beneficial, especially when trying to meet short deadlines with funding. This includes ensuring that our internal CRM systems can cope with changes and that internal teams are also on board to try something different, because that's not the easiest thing to get everyone on board with. As well as looking at our role in the project, either as a managing agent or a contractor, and what opportunities that can bring to the RSL. Ensuring that we have a good working relationship with contractors and a solid understanding of our delivery across Scotland, so we can analyze where there might be a supply chain or resource issue, has also been beneficial. So ensuring we collate all of those lessons learned from projects so we could approach the next one better informed. And we could also be more upfront with the contractor in that way on what worked and what didn't. And lastly, acknowledging the huge interest in energy efficiency, echoing what Agnes said earlier. Especially in the rural, north and in rural communities in general. So working closely with RSLs to deliver their local energy strategies and honing that householder enthusiasm. And we've seen that across all of our projects. So, sorry, it's frozen again. There we go. All right. So with all of that in mind, I'll give just a very brief overview of some projects. So it's worth mentioning that many of these examples are with local authorities for their housing stock. However, these things I'll say should reign true for housing associations as well. So in 2022 and 2023, we delivered a microgeneration project with Murray Council for 120 of its tenants. The project saw 120 households receiving an air source heat pump and solar PV and battery. We applied for the Net Zero Heat Fund and were awarded about 2.2 million in match funding, meaning the total project cost was around 4.5 million. In this project, we encountered many barriers, including weather, impacting timescales and technology, confusion over the use of technology for householders, lack of communication from the contractor to the tenants. As well, this was an opt-in scheme as the rent would increase for the tenants, so that in itself was different to deal with. So for this project, we have Mitsubishi come to visit some of the householders and ensure the handover packs from the contractor were comprehensive, so they were getting that confidence, building that confidence with the technology. We also had a strong on-site presence, and we increased our quality assurance through the duration of this project to better support the tenants. And in all, this was a highly successful project, and it did improve the energy efficiency and comfort for 120 households. We're currently starting another project with Murray Council again to deliver bespoke solutions for about 300 properties for their social tenants. So that includes analyzing home analytics data as well as EASH2 analysis that ChangeWorks recently carried out on their stock. The measures involved will be external wall insulation, cavity, internal wall insulation, loft, air source heat pump, solar PV battery, with the council also looking to do windows and doors. So loads of great measures for the householders. The properties identified are scattered across the council, but they fail on the Scottish Housing Quality Standard. So that's why they're put on this list. And we've applied for, just to note another barrier, we have applied for the Net Zero Heat Fund for it back in October, and we're still waiting to hear back about that fund. So that's a very real, barrier that we're dealing with currently, but trying to get everything we can get done before hopefully having a positive response for that. Likewise, we'll shortly be kicking off a large-scale project, again with Murray in and around Elgin, not necessarily rural per se, but that will be for 600 social tenants. And again, that's when I'm saying house-led retrofit, each house needs different measures. So we're letting the house tell us what it needs there. So not quite a whole house retrofit, but as close to. Yeah, the delivery needs for that need to be taken into consideration because again, that has a tight time scale and all those properties are actually within the same area. So that would be a different approach than if they were scattered along the council. And then working with Cairn Housing Association, we're looking to deliver high retention storage heaters and install solar PV and batteries for 35 flats up in Thurso. So those are some exciting things that are about to kick off. So yeah, if you have any questions, please let me know, but that's just, some experiences that we've had lately for delivering in the rural north. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Amber. That's really interesting to hear from all three of our speakers. So if we open up to questions.